You know that moment at the end of Avengers Endgame when an old man sits quietly on a park bench holding the same shield that once symbolized courage, sacrifice, and an unshakable moral compass? Everyone smiled, right? It was closure. Captain America had finally earned his peace. But what if I told you that peaceful moment might not have been what it seemed? Because here's the wild part. What if that old captain wasn't the real captain at all? Yeah, stay with me on this. I've broken down these details in such a way that they'll leave you shocked. And trust me, you'll only understand the full theory if you watch till the very end. So, here are 2 questions I want you to keep in your mind throughout this breakdown. First, if Steve Rogers really stayed in the past, did that mean he lost the super soldier serum and lived a completely ordinary life? And second, when he returned those Infinity Stones, what exactly happened to him, especially when it came to the Soul Stone? If both of those things don't fully add up, then maybe, just maybe, the man who handed the shield to Sam wasn't the Steve Rogers we think we knew. Today we're diving into one of Marvel's most quietly haunting mysteries, the return of Captain America, and the theory that the old man at the end of Endgame might not have been the same Steve Rogers we followed for more than a decade. I'm not talking about a simple continuity error or some random timeline mix-up. What we're unpacking here could reshape how we interpret Endgame's final act, and maybe even how we view the entire next phase of the MCU. So, let's rewind piece by piece to figure out what actually happened to Captain America after he disappeared into the quantum tunnel. The last time we saw Steve in action, he was preparing for one final mission to return all the 6 Infinity Stones back to their rightful points in time. It was poetic in a way. The man who started as the symbol of selflessness would now close the loop, fixing what the Avengers had broken. But there's something deeply unsettling about that decision, isn't there? He wasn't just traveling through time. He was literally stepping into 6 different moments in reality, 6 alternate dangers. One wrong move and the entire fabric of existence could collapse again. Still, he smiled, calm, ready, almost too ready. He knew something we didn't. Now, here's what the movie shows. Steve disappears. The quantum platform goes silent. Bruce Banner, Sam Wilson, and Bucky Barnes wait for his signal, but it never comes. Seconds later, instead of appearing on the platform, an old man sits peacefully nearby like he's been waiting there for years. We learn that Steve stayed in the past. He lived a full life with Peggy Carter, the woman he had lost to time. He grew old, he smiled, he handed the shield to Sam. And that's it, that's the end of his story. Except it isn't because something doesn't sit right, and it never did. Let's talk about the obvious first, time travel. Endgame introduced a version of it that was different from every other movie we'd seen before. They explicitly said changing the past doesn't change your future. What it does instead is create a branch timeline. That means if Steve went back to the 1940s and stayed there, he didn't overwrite history. He created a brand new branch of reality. A version where Captain America was alive during the decades he was supposed to be frozen in ice. So, how did that same old man suddenly show up in our main timeline if his entire life happened in a different one? That's the first fracture. That's where the theory starts to breathe. Now, Marvel's creative team couldn't even agree on the answer. The writers Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely said Steve always existed in the main MCU timeline. He lived quietly, never interfering, and just let events play out until he chose to reveal himself. But the directors, the Russo brothers, flat out disagreed. They insisted Steve created a new branch timeline when he stayed in the past and later jumped back to the main one only to pass on the shield. So even within the official story, there are 2 realities, 2 conflicting truths, which, if you think about it, sounds exactly like the kind of paradox you'd get if there were actually 2 Captain Americas, one from the main timeline who went back to return the stones, and one who lived a normal life in a branch universe. Now, you might be thinking, okay fine, maybe he just jumped timelines. But here's where things get weirder. If the Steve we see at the end is from that alternate reality, how would he even age like a regular human being? Because remember, Steve Rogers' body was transformed by the super soldier serum. His aging was slow to the point where after being frozen for 70 years, he woke up looking exactly the same. That means he shouldn't be physically capable of becoming an old man, not naturally. So, if the old man sitting on that bench had aged normally, that might not be the Steve Rogers who was injected with the serum at all. See where this is going? If the real Captain America, the one enhanced with superhuman strength, agility, and regeneration, went back in time, what if something else happened to him? Something that explains why the man who returned wasn't quite the same. Let's trace his mission one stone at a time. The Space Stone. Easy. Return it to the point where Loki grabbed it during the time heist. The Reality Stone, also manageable, though it would mean sneaking up on Jane Foster and reinserting an Infinity-level artifact into her bloodstream. The Mind Stone, the Time Stone, the Power Stone, all theoretically doable. But the Soul Stone? That's where everything collapses. Because Red Skull made it clear to claim the Soul Stone, you must lose that which you love. A soul for a soul. If Steve had to return it, what did he have to give back? That's where fans started whispering, maybe he didn't return it at all. Maybe he sacrificed himself. Or maybe something was sacrificed in his place. Imagine this. Steve stands on Vormir, staring up at the same eerie mountain where Natasha and Clint once argued about who would die. The wind howls. Red Skull drifts toward him, that haunting, ageless figure who once stood against him in the 1940s. And Red Skull smiles because he knows you do not simply give back the Soul Stone, Captain. What if at that moment Steve's soul was split? One version lost to Vormir, bound to that mountain just like Red Skull had been, and another sent back to live out a human life in peace. That would explain everything. Why the old Captain doesn't have super strength, why his face is weathered and ordinary, why he seems lighter, almost detached. It would mean the Steve Rogers sitting on that bench wasn't the original super soldier at all, but a human echo. The version left behind after Steve's spiritual essence was sacrificed to restore the Soul Stone. I know that sounds crazy, but remember Marvel's multiverse is built on exactly this kind of duality. Every action creates a branch, every branch creates another self, and in Steve's case that branch might have split his soul. Let's push this idea further. When Steve returns the Soul Stone, the balance of life and death must be maintained. So what if in giving it back he offers up his superhuman side, that serum-enhanced body, that indestructible core as the sacrifice? That means the Steve who stayed behind with Peggy was for the first time since the 1940s purely human, no longer faster, stronger, or ageless, just Steve Rogers, the man, not the symbol. That's why he aged normally. That's why his story ends peacefully, because he literally became mortal again. But here's the kicker. That process could also mean he was no longer the same person we knew. If his soul or his serum-enhanced essence was taken by Vormir, that's the version of Steve that might still exist somewhere out there, timeless, trapped, maybe even aware of what he lost. That version of Steve could be the key to Avengers Doomsday. Because think about it, if Doomsday truly begins where Endgame left off, as some reports have suggested, it might open with Peggy and Steve's quiet life until something interrupts it. Maybe Doctor. Doom discovers what happened on Vormir, that a fragment of Captain America's essence was left behind. Maybe it's the one thing holding reality together, and the Steve who lived with Peggy. He might be forced to confront the truth that he isn't the original Captain America. That somewhere in the multiverse, the real one never returned. Now that would be an emotional explosion. It would mean every moment of his peaceful life, every dance, every sunset, every memory with Peggy was borrowed time, and Marvel loves doing that, turning victory into something tragic. Before we go that deep though, let's step back to the science of it all. Because Endgame's own logic may actually support this without us even realizing it. According to the Ancient One, the moment you remove an Infinity Stone from its timeline, you create a fracture, a branch. The only way to prevent chaos is to return the stones to exactly where they came from. That means Steve wasn't just traveling through time, he was weaving between fractured realities, each one altered by the stone's removal. So each time he placed the stone back, he would have been touching a version of reality where events unfolded slightly differently. Versions that might have reacted differently to his presence, meaning by the time he finished, he might not have been in his original timeline at all. In other words, the Steve Rogers who eventually stayed with Peggy might have belonged to a slightly different reality than the one he started from. That's why when we see him old, sitting on that bench, there's a slight disconnect. His presence doesn't break the rules of time travel. It's just from another path. Another Steve gently merged into ours, which opens a darker possibility. What if our Steve never made it back? What if the one sitting on the bench isn't our Steve, but an alternate one who somehow crossed over? If that's true, then the real question becomes, where did the original Captain America go? Is he still out there somewhere in the vast multiverse, timeless, unchanged, maybe even preparing to return when the universe needs him again? That's the haunting thought. Because if there are two Steves, then one is still waiting. And that's just the beginning. Because as much as I've watched Endgame, as many interviews and scripts and frame-by-frame details I've studied, the deeper you look, the more one thing becomes clear: the ending wasn't meant to be final. It was meant to be interpreted. It's like Marvel left the door open on purpose and we all just assumed it was closed. So before we move forward, keep this image in your mind. One old man sitting quietly on a bench smiling because he finally found peace. But deep down, maybe knowing that peace wasn't really his. Because what if the real captain never came home? I've thought about that bench scene for years. The simplicity of it, no fanfare, no portal, no return sequence, just Steve sitting there like he'd been there all along. It's poetic, sure, but it's too neat, too clean for a story that spent 11 years dealing with moral paradoxes and cosmic consequences. So, if we take seriously the idea that the old captain wasn't the same one who left, then the next logical step is to ask, who exactly was he? Because this isn't just a timeline issue, it's a question of identity. Let's imagine that moment again. Steve finishes returning the stones. One by one, he places them back, restoring harmony. But each act changes him. Each interaction with time and the cosmic balance leaves a residue. He's not just hopping between points in time, he's absorbing the multiverse itself. And then he reaches Vormir. That's where the true mystery begins. If we assume the Red Skull is still there, eternal, cursed, then Steve meeting him again wouldn't be a coincidence. It would be destiny circling back on itself. The man who fought against Hydra's greatest weapon in 1945 now faces the ghost of Hydra's creation. And this time, Red Skull doesn't want to fight, he wants to trade. Now, Red Skull's role on Vormir is fascinating. He's described as a guide bound to lead others to the Soul Stone, but never to possess it. When Thanos and Natasha arrived, he greeted them like he already knew their fates. That means his consciousness exists beyond time. He perceives every visitor as part of an endless loop. So when Steve arrives, imagine what that means. The two enemies who once fought to the death are now both prisoners of cosmic irony. Red Skull would recognize him instantly. He'd smile with that twisted satisfaction. Captain, at last. Now think, what could Steve possibly offer in return for the Soul Stone? Because it's not a physical object that can just be returned, it's a fragment of the universe's equilibrium. You can't undo a sacrifice without creating a vacuum. So maybe Steve doesn't return the stone at all. Maybe he restores it by giving something back, something equally valuable. What's more valuable than the soul of the man who represents humanity's best? And this is where my theory deepens. I believe that on Vormir, Steve's encounter wasn't a simple drop-off, it was an exchange. He gave up the part of himself that was superhuman, his serum-enhanced essence, his unaging vitality, his invincibility, and in doing so, he restored the universal balance. The cost, he became human again. That's why when we see him decades later, he's aged. The serum was gone. The man sitting on that bench wasn't the same Steve who could lift Mjolnir or outrun explosions. He was the man who earned that peace through sacrifice. But that sacrifice may have also created something else, a split. Because energy, especially soul energy, doesn't just vanish. The super soldier part of Steve, the strength, the purity, the unbreakable will might not have been destroyed. It could have been reborn. Now imagine this. That essence of Steve ripped from him at Vormir forms an alternate being, an echo, a version without a home. The real Captain America stripped of his humanity but retaining his cosmic awareness. The soldier without peace. Where would that version go? Not the past, not the present. He'd exist between timelines, a multiversal orphan drifting between realities. And that's exactly the kind of concept Marvel has been building towards since Loki and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Because if the MCU has taught us anything, it's that time branches aren't stable. Every major emotional event creates a fracture point. Vormir could have been one of the biggest. And so maybe out there somewhere there's a Steve Rogers who never returned. The real one. The one with the serum. Still ageless, still burdened, still watching. That would make the old captain we saw not fake, but incomplete. A version missing half of himself. Now, let's tie this to Peggy Carter because she's more than just the love interest in this equation. She's the bridge between the timelines. Peggy represents the life Steve was denied, the world he fought for but never lived in. So when he stays behind with her, it's not random, it's symbolic. He chooses peace over purpose. But if he stayed in a branch timeline, that also means there was another Peggy in the main one, the one who lived her life without him, built SHIELD, and eventually died while Steve visited her in the hospital. So when old Steve shows up in the main timeline handing the shield to Sam, it raises the impossible question, how did he get back? Endgame never shows him using the quantum platform again. There's no indication of Pym particles left. So how did a man from another timeline travel to a point in this one without equipment, without help? Unless he didn't travel at all. Unless he was always meant to appear there. Let's break that down. If the multiverse is a tree, each branch represents a timeline. Sometimes two branches can grow close enough that they touch. When they touch, brief crossovers happen, a phenomenon we saw teased in Loki and fully realized in Spider-Man: No Way Home. So maybe that bench scene wasn't time travel in the physical sense. It was the point where two branches, Steve's life with Peggy and the main MCU timeline, intersected briefly, allowing him to appear in both at once. That would explain why no one noticed him before, why he seemed perfectly calm. He wasn't returning to his world. His world was temporarily connected to ours. It's poetic, really. Steve didn't break the rules of time travel. He simply existed at the one point where the rules overlapped. But here's the emotional gut punch. That connection might not last. Once those branches drift apart again, the Steve we saw on the bench might fade. His presence, his body, his story, all absorb back into his reality. That means the shield he gave Sam isn't just a weapon, it's a relic from another universe, a multiversal artifact. And if you've been paying attention to Marvel's recent breadcrumbs, that's exactly the kind of setup they've been building toward. Because Avengers Doomsday, according to leaks and interviews, may explore what happens when the walls between timelines start to collapse. Dr. Turl. Doom could be the one manipulating those intersections using fragments of alternate realities as power sources. And if the old Captain America's shield came from a branched world, Doom might see it as the key to stabilizing or destroying universes. That's why the idea that the old Captain wasn't the real one isn't just a fan theory. It's potentially the foundation for the next Avengers saga. Now, let's explore something that often gets overlooked: Steve's personality shift. When you watch that final scene carefully, the Steve sitting on the bench feels subtly different. His voice is softer, slower, his expression isn't just peaceful, it's detached, almost as if he's remembering something he can't quite explain. That's not an accident. That's the visual language of memory displacement. A man who knows too much but chooses silence. Because if he told Sam the truth, that he wasn't from this reality, or that part of his soul was left behind, it would shatter everything the Avengers believed in. So instead, he smiles, hands over the shield, and lets the mystery die with him. Except, it didn't die, it just waited. And I think Avengers Doomsday will pick up that silence. Here's where it gets even more compelling. In the comics, the multiverse isn't just a scientific concept. It's deeply personal. Every version of a character reflects a choice they didn't make. Every variant is a what-if given form. So, picture this. One day, Sam Wilson, now Captain America, starts noticing inconsistencies in the shield's vibranium resonance. It's slightly off, slightly alien. Then, a new threat emerges. A being claiming to be Steve Rogers. Not old, not weak, but in his prime. And he's not from this world. That's the original Steve. The one who returned the stones. The one who never aged. The one still carrying the serum in his veins. Maybe he escaped Vormir. Maybe he's been fighting across dimensions. But he's back. And he's not the same man we remember. He's broken. That would create the ultimate emotional confrontation. Sam's Captain America versus the original Captain America. Two men carrying the same legacy but from completely different realities. And in the middle of it all, Dr. Doom manipulating both sides. Because Doom's genius isn't just in technology, it's in understanding the nature of power. And what's more powerful than the soul of Captain America itself? If Doom could harness the split essence of Steve Rogers, the mortal side from one world and the immortal side from another, he could control the balance between universes. That's how Avengers Doomsday could literally mean the end of all timelines. But let's come back to the emotional heart of this theory, because beyond all the science and speculation, what makes it powerful is Steve's humanity. The idea that he didn't just retire, he sacrificed his superhuman self to live as a human. Think about that. Every hero in the MCU dreams of peace, but only Steve actually found it and paid for it with the one thing that defined him. He gave up being a hero to be a man. That's why the ending feels bittersweet. It's not just closure, it's a quiet tragedy hidden inside a happy ending. But the Marvel Universe doesn't let things rest. Peace never lasts long, and the MCU has always rewarded fans who look deeper, who catch the ripples that seem small but mean everything later. Remember in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier when Bucky said, "That shield's got complicated legacy." I think that wasn't just about symbolism, it was literal. The shield itself may carry a complicated legacy, a physical reminder of a fractured timeline. If you really pay attention, even its texture seems subtly different in Endgame's final scene compared to earlier films. That could be a cinematic trick or an intentional hint. The question then becomes, what if the shield isn't from our timeline anymore? What if it was pulled from the branch where old Steve lived, a timeline where Tony never died, or Thanos never invaded, and brought into ours when the branch is briefly touched? That means Sam's shield might be a multiversal artifact with residual energy from that reality. An echo of a world we'll eventually see in Doomsday. It's subtle storytelling like this that makes Marvel's timeline so dangerous and fascinating. Every choice, every artifact, every emotional beat might carry interdimensional consequences. And Steve Rogers' final act might have set off the biggest one yet. Because what if his peaceful life with Peggy wasn't peaceful at all? Imagine decades later, the world changes. Hydra rises again, wars come and go, and Steve, older but human, starts seeing fractures in reality. He hears whispers, sees glimmers of another version of himself reflected in mirrors or dreams. Peggy notices too. Maybe she's even contacted by SHIELD or by Howard Stark's notes on quantum theory. They realize Steve isn't fully of this reality. So, as time goes on, Peggy's love becomes not just romantic, but protective. She hides him, knowing that his existence could destabilize their timeline if discovered. That's why no one in the MCU ever mentions the other Steve, because he wasn't supposed to exist. And that secret, that hidden life, could be the emotional backbone of Avengers Doomsday's opening act. Imagine the movie starting with Peggy's final years, her journal entries hinting that the man she loved wasn't who she thought he was. Her last line might even be, "If anyone finds this, he's not the same Steve Rogers you remember." Cut to black. The multiverse trembles. That's how you pull a full circle. The man who once represented unwavering truth ends up becoming the MCU's biggest mystery. And the truth is, maybe that's exactly what Marvel wanted. Because there's something poetic about Captain America's story, ending not with certainty but with questions. It mirrors our world, how even the most righteous heroes have hidden sides, contradictions, and unfinished stories. And maybe that's why the idea that the old Captain wasn't the real Captain resonates so deeply, because it forces us to look at Steve Rogers not as a myth, but as a man who made impossible choices. We believed he walked off into the sunset, but maybe he walked into another world. And if that's true, then his story isn't over. Not even close. Every time I rewatch that quiet moment on the bench, Steve's eyes glinting under the sunlight, the way he says, "How did it feel?" and Sam replies, "Like it's someone else's." I can't help but wonder if that wasn't just a line about legacy. Maybe it was the script's biggest hidden confession. Maybe it really was someone else's shield, someone else's story. Because the more I analyze the timeline, the more the puzzle rearranges itself into something stranger, something cosmic, a spiritual fracture that didn't just divide one man, but the moral center of the Avengers themselves. See, in the MCU, Captain America was always the compass, the one who could tell right from wrong when no one else could. But what happens when the compass splits in two? That's the foundation of what I call the soul split theory. Here's the idea. When Steve returned the Soul Stone, it didn't simply vanish back into the timeline. The Soul Stone by nature is linked to consciousness. It reads intention, emotion, sacrifice. So when Steve offered it back, the stone wouldn't just accept it like a library book return, it would react. It would exchange. Think of the stone like a living entity, one that takes what it's owed. When Thanos sacrificed Gamora, he gave up love to gain power. When Steve returned the stone, he gave up power to regain love. But the stone doesn't forget balance. In taking away his superhuman essence, it also copied it. That essence, that perfect mixture of purity and strength, could have become an autonomous echo. A second Steve created not by science, but by cosmic equilibrium. That echo might not even realize it's separate at first. It would think it's Steve. It would remember everything. The serum, the wars, the Avengers, but it would exist detached outside of linear time. So, while the human Steve lived decades with Peggy, this other Steve, the soul echo, would be wandering timeless across realities. Now, let's add cross realities. Doom into this picture. In the comics, Doom's obsession isn't just ruling the world, it's mastering the structure of existence itself. He's a scientist, but also a sorcerer. He studies not just matter, but the metaphysical. And if the rumors about Avengers Doomsday are true, that it will connect the remnants of the multiverse torn by Loki, No Way Home, and Multiverse of Madness, then Doom's role could be bigger than we've ever imagined. He's not just after control, he's after perfection. And what's more perfect than a man who's literally split between mortal and divine? Doom in his quest to unify realities might discover what happened on Vormir. Maybe he finds remnants of Steve's cosmic energy still resonating across timelines, the echo of a soul that was divided. Imagine Doom studying that energy, realizing it's the key to repairing or rewriting reality itself. A pure soul, uncorrupted, split in two, the ultimate cosmic constant. He'd want it, he'd hunt it. That's where the hunt for Captain America begins. Now, think about what that means emotionally, because Steve isn't just a soldier, he's the MCU's moral foundation. If his essence becomes a weapon, the Avengers face an existential threat unlike any other. They wouldn't just be fighting to save the world, they'd be fighting to save the idea of the world. And that's what I think Avengers Doomsday will explore. Not just multiversal chaos, but moral chaos. Because if the universe loses its moral compass, everything else unravels. Picture this. Early in Doomsday, Sam Wilson's Captain America starts sensing strange vibrations in the shield. Its vibranium molecules pulse irregularly, almost alive. Strange golden light flickers within its surface, echoing the Soul Stone's energy. Sam brings it to Doctor Strange for analysis. Strange studies it and freezes. He says, "This isn't from our reality." Almost like a whisper, a faint image of Steve Rogers appears reflected in the shield, not old, not tired, but in his prime. And Strange realizes that's not a memory, it's a signal, a soul calling out from another reality. That's the echo, the Steve who never returned. But if that Steve is alive somewhere, how? That's where the science collides with the spiritual. The human Steve, the one who aged, represents completion. He fulfilled his destiny, chose peace, ended his story. The Echo Steve, the ageless one, represents incompletion. He's the embodiment of everything unresolved, everything undone. A man frozen in time once again, only this time in metaphysical form. If the multiverse begins collapsing, as hinted by Kang's warning and the incursions teased in Doctor Strange 2, Doom could realize that the key to restoring balance isn't another Infinity Stone. It's Steve Rogers' soul, the purest fragment of humanity ever enhanced by science. Cut to the remnants of a destroyed citadel in Latveria. A figure drags himself from the rubble, Doom mask cracked, armor scorched. He looks up at the sky, watching the golden light fade into blue. So even gods can be forgiven. He stares at his hands, once glowing with stolen power, now empty. Then faintly a whisper, Steve's voice echoing from beyond. Everyone deserves a chance to do better. Doom's expression darkens. Then, I'll take mine. He turns toward the horizon and vanishes into a portal of emerald light. The war isn't over, it's just changing shape. If you really think about it, Endgame didn't end anything. It started the biggest paradox in Marvel history. Not about time, but about purpose. Captain America didn't just go home, he went beyond. He became a test. The universe's way of asking, what does goodness mean when it costs you everything? And that's what Avengers Doomsday could really be. Not a story about who wins or loses, but about what survives when all the noise stops. Because peace isn't the opposite of fighting, it's the result of finally accepting who you are, every version of you. And that's the lesson. Not that Steve escaped the war, but that he finally ended it. So maybe the next time we see Captain America, it won't be the man with the shield. It'll be the idea of him living through Sam, through Strange, through every choice the Avengers make when the world falls apart. Because heroes aren't just made in battle, they're made in forgiveness. And maybe when Doomsday comes, the real victory won't be about saving the universe. It'll be about saving what makes it worth saving. There's a quiet that follows every great war. A silence so deep, it almost feels like the world itself is holding its breath. And when I picture the ending of Avengers Doomsday, that's exactly what I see. Not a universe in ruins, not a battlefield littered with broken heroes, just stillness. Because when the fighting stops, that's when the truth finally speaks. And the truth, as I see it, is this. The old captain who returned at the end of Endgame wasn't just Steve Rogers, he was the echo of everything he stood for, the version of him that the universe needed to survive. And this is where everything comes together. The movie opens on a sunrise. Not metaphorical, but literal. The first dawn after the Doomsday event, cities are still reeling. Strange portals hang open across the world, flickering like ghosts of broken timelines. But there's hope again. The kind of fragile hope that always follows devastation. Sam Wilson walks through the quiet streets of Washington, D.C., his new suit torn, but his spirit unbroken. Reporters shout questions, asking if the Avengers are still together. Sam just shakes his head. We'll always be together, even if we're apart. Behind him, the rebuilt shield reforged from the shard, infused with soul energy, gleams faintly. It's smaller now, more ceremonial than functional. Because Sam's fight isn't about war anymore, it's about meaning. And that's what this whole story has been about. Every stone, every sacrifice, every paradox, it all leads here to the question, what does it mean to live when you were built to fight? Across the world, the aftermath unfolds like the calm after an earthquake. Wakanda opens its borders again. Kamartaj stabilizes. The timeline fractures. Even New Asgard begins to rebuild. And through all of it, whispers spread, stories of a man who faced a god inside the soul realm and chose peace over power. That man, of course, was Steve Rogers. But here's the twist, not everyone believes it. Some think it's a myth, a legend conjured to inspire hope. Others claim Steve's consciousness still exists somewhere beyond time, guarding the multiverse like a silent sentinel. And then there are those who think he became something else entirely. One theory I love, and that I genuinely believe Marvel could explore, is that Steve's soul merged with the very essence of the Soul Stone itself. That he didn't die or vanish, he transcended. Think about it, he was the one Avenger who returned all the stones, who restored balance. Wouldn't it make sense for the universe to keep him as part of that balance? Like a guardian spirit woven into the cosmic fabric. Not dead, not alive, eternal. We cut to Strange's Sanctum where Wong studies readings from the rift that once connected to Vormir. The energy signature is gone, stable, balanced, but one pulse keeps reappearing, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Wong frowns. It's like something is alive in there. Strange just smiles knowingly, not something, someone. And that's where I think Marvel will take it. This concept that Captain America, the idea of him, didn't end with Steve. It became an energy, a force of moral equilibrium, the soul realm's protector, not as a man with a shield, but as a voice that whispers through the universe whenever someone faces a moral choice. The ultimate evolution of the man out of time. Now, he's the man beyond time. But of course, no peace lasts forever. In the ruins of Latveria, Victor Von Doom returns. The portal that swallowed him at the end of Doomsday spits him out into his lab, damaged, drained, but alive. His armor's gone, his mask cracked. For the first time, Doom looks human. He stares at the remnants of the moral engine, broken, sparking with faint golden light. He kneels before it, torn between pride and despair. And in that moment, we hear Steve's voice again, faint, distant, echoing in Doom's mind. You can still choose, Victor. For a heartbeat, Doom looks up. Not angry, not defiant, but thoughtful. And that's the brilliance of it, because even Doom in all his arrogance is a reflection of Steve. Both men obsessed with control, both trying to fix a broken world, one through compassion, the other through domination. And now, after all of it, Doom stands at the crossroads Steve once faced. Does he continue chasing godhood, or does he finally embrace the one thing he never could, humility? The camera lingers on his cracked mask. He whispers, if I cannot rule the world, then perhaps I can rebuild it. And there it is, the faintest spark of redemption. Maybe that's what Steve's final gift was. Not saving the universe, but giving even its greatest villain the possibility of change. Meanwhile, back in New York, Sam's facing his own test. The world's governments are arguing about how to rebuild the Avengers. Some want to militarize them, others want to disband them entirely. Sam listens to all of it, the politics, the fear, the posturing, and then walks out of the meeting. He goes to the old Avengers compound, now little more than rubble and memory. He kneels beside the spot where Steve handed him the shield years ago. The wind rustles the trees. "You are right," Sam says softly. "It's not about the uniform, it's about the choice." He pulls something from his pocket. Not the shield, but a new emblem. A single star cut from vibranium forged from the shard Steve left behind. He places it on the ground. "This isn't just for you. It's for everyone who believes in something better." And right there, Sam makes a decision. No more governments, no more orders. No more waiting for permission to do what's right. From that moment, Captain America isn't a soldier again. He's a symbol reborn. One who leads with conviction, not obedience, because Steve's legacy wasn't about following the flag, it was about questioning it. Later that night, Sam dreams, but it doesn't feel like a dream. He's standing in that same golden void where Steve once faced doom, only this time it's calm, silent, peaceful. He hears footsteps, slow, steady. He turns, and there he is, Steve Rogers, younger, clear-eyed, smiling. "You've done good, Sam." Sam laughs, tears welling up. "You know, I kept waiting for you to come back. Figured you'd find a way." Steve shakes his head. "I never left." That line hits like lightning because that's the point. Steve didn't vanish. He became something else. The living embodiment of selflessness, existing wherever courage exists. "I'm proud of you," Steve says. "You carried it further than I ever could." Sam asks if this is goodbye. Steve glances around the golden horizon. "No, this is the world we saved." Every time someone chooses to do the right thing when it's hard, that's me, that's you, that's all of us. Ottern flax, Otterns, Ottern flax axe Otterns. Or the light brightens, the wind stills. Steve starts to fade. "The world's yours now, Captain." And then he's gone. Sam wakes up, his hand glowing faintly with golden energy. The soul resonance. A piece of Steve's spirit now forever bound to him. He smiles. "Guess I'll keep it safe." Weeks pass. The world begins to stabilize. But beneath it all, the question remains. What happens when belief itself becomes fractured? The last scene before the credits shows Strange meeting Sam at the sanctum. "You feel it too, don't you?" Strange says. "That hum beneath the world." "Yeah," Sam replies, like something's still waiting. Strange nods slowly. "It's not over. Doom isn't the only one who's seen beyond the veil. There are others." And that's when we see it. In a hidden chamber somewhere in deep space, a glowing tear opens. Through it steps a hooded figure carrying a staff made of the same golden material as the Soul Stone. We don't see their face, only a voice, cold and curious. The balance has shifted. Time to test the next Avenger. Cut to black. That's Marvel's setup for the next era. Not just cosmic threats, but moral ones. Because now the fight isn't about saving the universe. It's about saving what makes it human. The screen cuts between clips of Steve, frail before the serum, defiant against bullies, leading armies, holding back Thanos, dancing with Peggy. Every version of him was fighting for the same thing, the right to be human in a world that demanded gods. And that's what separates Steve Rogers from every other hero in the MCU. He doesn't chase power, he defines it. So no, the old captain wasn't fake, he was final. The truest version of the man who finally found balance. Maybe that's what Avengers Doomsday will really show us. Not the destruction of reality, but the healing of it, not through more fighting, but through the acceptance of imperfection. Because in the end, Steve didn't win by lifting the hammer, he won by knowing when to put it down. That's the legacy Marvel built with Captain America. Not invincibility, but integrity. Not immortality, but influence. The kind that never fades, even when the man himself is gone. All of them connected, all of them changed because one man believed that goodness could survive even in a world that didn't deserve it. And if that's not the most powerful superpower of all, I don't know what is. So, what do you think? Was the old captain we saw really Steve Rogers? Or was he something more? A reflection, a projection, maybe even a cosmic balance point? Whatever the truth is, I think we can all agree on one thing. He got his dance. And maybe that's the only happy ending any hero can really ask for.